Connect the Dots Live. Today, I am joined by Dr. I, and I am super pumped to have this talk with her because today we're talking about our broken school system. Now, I know this sounds a bit polarizing for you folks, but hear us out. This is going to be a fun and educational and constructive episode. So, a little bit about Dr. I. She is self-employed at Dr. I, digital learning and storytelling consulting. She has studied communications at the University of Maryland, also at College Park, and at, oh my God, I can't even pronounce this, Syracuse University. Did I say that right, I?
100%.
Perfect. She is also a host of not only one, but two live shows, one called Classroom Without Walls and What is School For? Or What is School For, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And she empowers teens and young adults to gain confidence, skills, motivation, and career clarity to create and land dream jobs. Now, gosh, where the heck was she when I was in high school, right? um, and last but not least, something you may not know about her already, she has interviewed almost over 100 people, and some of her special guests were none other than Seth Godin. Here she is, lovely picture, and Neil Patel. So, as you can see, she is well connected. She's been seen in a few places. So, listen up, guys. We got some good stuff for you. And the first question I have for her, and this is basically her bread and butter, is what is school for? Can we talk about that a bit?
Yeah, that's like $1 million question. I don't think I have the answer yet, but I'm still exploring. I think, for me, I was an educator. I guess I'm still an educator. So I taught in the classroom for 15 plus years. And now I run my own school. I think the purpose of education or schooling, and first of all, there is a big difference between schooling and education. I think when you ask most people, and like, what is education? Most people think of education as, going to a school, like a physical school to learn. And I think that is wrong. And I truly believe, if we're talking about future-proof the next generation, like only 20% of that happens inside a physical building that we call school. And 80% of a person's transformation, self-discovery actually happens outside school. So I think, to answer the question, what is school for? And when I think of school, it's not the traditional, like, in like, and sitting on the chair inside the building, but actually a more holistic that covers not only the 20% sitting on the chairs and listening to a teacher regurgitating information, but more importantly, the 80% that actually happens outside the classroom. And I think a good educator or a good educational experience is to really help our students discover who they are, help them discover their intrinsic values and help them discover what they are naturally good at and to leverage that and to co-design a career, a future path based on who they are, their core values internally, and a career path externally. Have that alignment. I think so many students nowadays, they are depressed, unhappy. And even, there's a Gallup study, they surveyed, I think 2 billion full-time workers. And 95% of full-time workers are very unhappy about their work. Not only unhappy, I think in the survey, they said they hate their jobs. And that is a very strong emotion, a very high percentage. I think it really goes back to this misalignment between who they are internally versus the career path that they're taking. Like what I do at Classroom Without Walls, and what I think the true purpose of education is to really help them engage in that internal discovery and also combined with an external kind of discovery, like both, you want them to be aligned.
Right. No, that's fantastic. And I think you hit on some of the key points here is, core values and your place of being in this world. These are not key phrases or key buzzwords that were going around when I was in school, which I don't know, over a decade ago, more than a decade ago. And I think now, especially living as a life coach and teaching this as well, to find the core values. And we talked about this a bit before the show about ikigai, right? Our reason for being, right? And I know you do that also. You offer that in your course or your program as well, correct?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think because very few students actually, because when you go to school, you have academic advisors, but rarely do you have a life advisor or life coach, in the career center. Most people will advise you based on external factors like your academic performance, like ranking. It is very common when I have a chat with a student or even the students I interview on my show, what is school for? And many of them, when I ask them, why did you choose this as a career, as a major? Most of them have no idea. And typical answers include, from the media, because I watch some show, I love that, and or from the parents, or from my advisor. My advisor told me that I'm really good at this, therefore I want to do this. Or sometimes purely based on ranking. Like I interviewed a guy, he chose a major as his career, and only after 4 years, only to discover that he absolutely hated the major. Then I asked him, why did you choose that? He was like, oh, that major has a really good ranking in his school. That's why he chose it. So throughout like a person's learning journey, and nobody ever guided our students, hey, you need to go within to actually discover this. What are your strengths, ikigai, core values, what is your calling, or even like maybe not 5 years down the road, but what is something that you are really interested in. And nobody actually does that, especially as children become older, right? Always like your parents tell you, hey, you have to study this, you have to go to that school, or your teachers design a curriculum, do this, do this, do that. So if you do that over a decade or so, slowly you are losing your agency to think on your own behalf. And I work mainly with before I resigned, and with older kids like high school and college age students. And by the time they get to college, their agency is completely gone. Like if you ask a 4 years old, 5 years old, they can probably tell you, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that. But over the course of this journey, we call education or schooling, we're softly killing that, right? So by the time they get to college, students are typically asking the teacher, you tell me what to do, what should I do, right? What should I pursue as a career, like ranking, all those things. And then their heart is numb, it's asleep. So like when they join my program, a big part what I do is like self-discovery, to reawaken their like sleeping heart, to first discover who are you, what is something that you love. It is so interesting when I ask students that question. They were like, wow, nobody ever asked me that question. I really don't know what I love or what I'm really good at. It is so sad.
It is. No, definitely. And I think about it, especially too, firsthand. And I've done some speaks or some talks at some high schools. And kids nowadays, if you look at the system, and we just talked about this before we got on here, the classrooms haven't changed very much, right? They're sitting
Mhm.
there, they raise their hand, they're reprimanded if they get the answer wrong. I mean, not all the time. Some teachers are changing this, which I love, right? And just it's not conducive of creativity. It's not conducive of
No.
failing is part of success. It's not the opposite, right? I love how
Yeah,
you're reigniting
100%.
all this.
100%. And students, they're so afraid of failures. I still remember it was last year I had this conversation with a high school teacher, and she said that her students refuse to write down an answer unless it is a pencil with the eraser on the top. So if it is an
Hmm.
ink pen, they are just so afraid of making a mistake. And that is so common nowadays among students. And you were talking about creativity. We both probably follow Sir Ken Robbins. Unfortunately, he passed away, but his TED Talk, right? Do schools kill creativity? Is the number one watch TED Talk, and I like the answer is yes. I mean, there are so many famous studies to back this up. Like there was a study, I don't know if you have heard of this, Alex. It's conducted by NASA, and about paper clips. So they asked the 4 years old, 5 years old kids, hey, guys, how many ways can you think of using a paper clip? And the young people, like they were like, yeah, this, and that. So they generated hundreds of ways. So they scored at 98% in terms of creativity and divergent thinking. And here's the crazy part. So 5 years later, they surveyed the same group of kids. So from 98%, and their creativity dropped to 50%. And another 5 years later, as they become professionals, working college graduates, and the number dropped to 2%. So you really have to ask yourself, what happened from 98 to 2%? So what happened is they become more educated. I see that in my students all the time. And that's a very important reason that we decided to homeschool my own kids. Yeah. But creativity definitely decreases because they are doing way too many multiple choices questions, answer keys, and they're losing their original ideas, or even if they haven't lost it, maybe they're afraid to share it.
Yeah. And I mean, fear, to me, and especially in my studies, fear kills all sense of creativity, right?
Mhm.
We're talking about creating this calmness, and the calmness is where you're able to create the best, right?
Mhm.
So instilling fear, instilling anger, you lose all emotional control, which apparently you only have about 10% of at any given moment. And with that fear, it's really sad to see these students be so affected. Which brings me to my next question here, and you're going to love this one, is what do you believe to be is the root cause of this broken school system we have? This could be, what do you think?
I think there can be definitely multiple factors. I think we mentioned this a little bit earlier. Most people think that learning only happens when you go to a physical school. I think that is very limiting because if you think that way, and the learning is like there's a stopping point when it comes to learning, right? So if learning only happens inside the school environment, when you are outside school, of course you don't have to learn. But you and I, we all know that to succeed in life, you have to be a lifelong learner. So I think first we really need to deconstruct that notion, like schooling, education, like where does learning actually takes place. And second, I think the way that we are evaluating our students is very broken. It's very wrong. I don't have a solution, but I just know that the way that we're evaluating students is not conducive to lifelong learning and to help them embrace failures. And in the United States, we use a GPA, grade point average, and every single student, every single parent I talk to is very obsessed with their children's academic performance, right? So many parents, they actually use that as a way to measure their own children's career performance or academic performance or success, right? It is funny, every time when I talk to a parent, the very first or second sentences they told me is, hey, Dr. I, my daughter or my son is a 4.0 student, is a 3.7 student. So they always use that as if academic performance or as if test scores are the only way to evaluate our students. But that is wrong. Because we are so obsessed with it, students, as a result, they're mirrors, right? They reflect that. They become overly obsessed with academic performance. So they learn not for the sake of learning. They learn for the sake of, earning a point or not losing a point. And that is very detrimental to learning because it is not real learning. And of course, you don't want to try anything new because what if you lose a point? And research has also shown that, for example, GPA, a grade point average, is actually inversely related to innovation. So in other words, the higher the GPA, the less likely that a kid is to innovate. When you think about it, it makes so much sense, right? Yeah, because one of my favorite books is from Robert Kawasaki, and it is titled A Students Work for C Students, B Students Work for the Government. It's kind of a radical title, but when you think about it, it makes so much sense because A students, or those students who score really high in terms of their GPA, they're very good at following instructions, they're very obedient. They don't do really crazy things outside the box. But like if you want to innovate, you have to be a risk taker, right? So you really have to ask yourself, if you are a parent, am I trying to help my kids become like a exam machine, smash all the 4.0s or like A's, or do I really want to help my kid become innovative, risk-taking, creative, thinking outside box? Because those two do not really go hand in hand. Again, when you go back to the school environment, and they use the GPA, they use exam scores as the only way to evaluate our students. And I think there should be different alternatives. But then again, when you think about the overall school environment, our class, when I was teaching, my classes were like 300 students, 400 students, very big, especially at research universities. I know like Stanford, Harvard, many schools, they have like big classes. And like if your class is that big, how can you not use exam to evaluate the students, right? Like by the end of the term, like this semester has to be over. Like there's no way as a teacher, I couldn't grade like 400 papers, no way, or reading hundreds of essay questions. It is impossible. Plus many, especially research university, big name universities, those classes are taught by teaching assistants. And when you think about, I was teaching when I was a teaching assistant. And besides teaching, that's my secondary job. And my goal was to finish my PhD. So then on top of that, very few TAs would really think like critically and creatively regarding how should I really help evaluate my students. And the easiest way is multiple choices, like Scantron exams. Once the students finish their exams, I just submit to a machine. The machine does all the grading. I don't have to do anything. So that model is very broken. And if we are talking about revolutionize the current education model, we really have to change the way that we're evaluating our students. And to do that, we need leaderships on board. We also need to reduce the class size and then tuition, like multiple factors. That's why I said I don't have an answer, but I know that way is wrong.
Yeah, no, I love how you're touching on all that. And one thing that I would add is that you mentioned this earlier, that learning doesn't end or stop once the classroom is over, right? I know you do this already as well, as educating the parent, having them foster their kids and not using these old traditional ways of thinking, right? School is supposed to be like this: go to school, learn that, get the GPA. I think whatever you touched on right there is so phenomenal, which I'm very, very curious to know in your professional experience, which brings me to my next question is, what are some of the biggest challenges students are faced with today, apart from the creativity that we talked about?
Yeah, there's so many. A great question. I think students, we like one biggest challenge is that we already mentioned that earlier. Lack of self-understanding. They don't know who they are. They don't know what they are good at. They have no idea. So that is already setting them up for a not so happy life, right? So think about it. You are like, I interview so many people who are nurses or who are supposed to be nurses, lawyers, doctors, only to discover after a 4-year college, on top of that, a few additional years, to discover this is not for them. This is not for them. For some people who are brave enough, they can reinvent. But for many people, they're like, oh, I already invested so much money in this. I'm already like 30 plus years old. Maybe I should just keep doing this. So I think that is a big challenge, is understanding who you are. I mean, that goes back to what we shared earlier, this internally. And second, students need to not only always rely on a teacher to teach them. I think we need to deconstruct this notion, sage on the stage. Many parents and students feel like, oh my God, the teacher is the sage on the stage. So what I learned is that as parents and as teachers, that we need to be guide on the side, not always teach our students everything that we know, but actually facilitate their own learning journey, because nobody can predict the best jobs in like 5 years, right? So last night I actually gave a talk, and I used World Economic Forum. They actually did a report of jobs of the future. They identified 7 like clusters of like emerging professions. And it is so interesting. For that report, they have a specific timetable. So those 7 potential careers are only for from 2020 to 2022. So they like only 2 years, time span. So when you think about it, a traditional high school or middle school, like, depending on which country you are, like typically 3 years or 4 years, and college 4 years or 2 years. So it is safe to say that by the time you graduate and whatever you have learned, is already going to become irrelevant. So if teachers are always being positioned as the sage on the stage, so we haven't taught our students how to learn to learn, right? How to learn and learn, unlearn, and relearn. And like one of my favorite quotes is from I forgot his name, but he said that the illiterate of the 21st century is not those who cannot write or read, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. So if a teacher or a parent is always positioned as the sage on the stage, we're doing a disservice to our students. They haven't developed the skill to learn on their own and unlearn what they have learned and relearn new stuff, because that's kind of the new cycle of knowledge. And we need to really adopt this guide on the side model, which is, I don't know everything. I cannot teach you everything, but I can facilitate the learning journey so that you learn how to learn, you learn how to think, you will have the ability to relearn, unlearn. And I think that is a big challenge for today's students. And because they are so obsessed with what is happening now, they're so obsessed with getting that GPA to like 4.0, they are missing the bigger picture, which is what I just shared, this journey of learn, unlearn, and relearn. So I think that those two are kind of like the biggest challenges. And learn outside the classroom, right? Watch YouTube videos, taking online classes, really remember that learning doesn't only happen in the classroom, and also depending on what you are learning. If you want to become a computer programmer, especially if you want to become a business person, an entrepreneur, I don't think traditional classrooms are actually the best place to learn those skills. You really have to supplement with outside classroom learning. So those are some of the challenges I can think of. And on top of that, students are really missing soft skills. I mean, creativity is just one of the soft skills. I think it was last year, there was a big study that came out saying that 75% of college graduates do not have soft skills. And I think students really need to improve their soft skills. But again, if the only thing you do is to really prepare for that exams, I don't think where on earth are you going to develop those soft skills. So you really have to like internships. Like I love doing podcast interviews to foster opportunities to learn outside the classroom. And that's how you really grow and develop essential life skills. So those are a few I can think of now.
An amazing answer. Thank you so much, which is great segue into my next question here. And you're going to love this one. What important topics aren't covered in schools but should be? Now, I know you talked about that a little bit in the last, section here, soft skills, guide on the side, learn how to unlearn, right? Now, for the sake of time here, I know we could add so much to the curriculum. What are the 3 subjects that would come to mind for you that you would add to the current curriculum?
I think one thing is definitely understanding the digital language, like social media, personal branding, learning how to use social media to create as a professional. I work with many schools or even colleges, high schools, and there's so much uneducated fear when it comes to social media. Social media definitely has a very bad reputation. If you talk to most parents, at least in the United States, they're so afraid of social media. And I worked with schools, they just completely block social media access. And I don't think that is the right approach. And I think social media definitely has the ugly side, but there's also the good side, right? How you and I will use social media. Without social media, you and I wouldn't even be connected. On launching a podcast, there are so many good ways to use social media, but students are not being exposed to those good usage of social media. As a result, they become a victim of digital media. As a result, you hear all those horrible news, you watch documentaries. I think that is really due to a lack of education when it comes to social media and technology. They are allowing social media to use them as opposed to students using social media to serve them for a bigger purpose, like professional development, maybe even starting a business, digital networking, content creation. Most kids are using social media to consume. Very, very few of them are learning how to use this to create. But when you look at the kids who are using this to create, I interviewed a high school graduate. He was using TikTok, editing videos, and he got himself featured in the New York Times. Like last year during COVID, he was talking, spreading positive energy, and bringing community together. In my book, that is how you should be using social media. But unfortunately, students are not learning that. So that is a missing piece. And also on top of that, students are only learning from academics. That is not enough. We need way more practitioners in the classroom, especially for applied fields like business, communication, and all those things, and social media. They need to learn not only from a book, but actually from a practitioner like you and me, who are actually practicing this on a daily basis. So that is definitely a course I would love to add, not just like a social media theory class, but really the practical applications of social media. Another thing that I think is really missing in the curriculum, and you and I, we already talked about soft skills. Besides that, I think it is another thing is mindset, to really understand human brain. And that is something that I wish I learned when I was a teacher. And to this day, I still question, wow, why teachers don't receive training regarding how people learn? And I learned through my own training that human beings will actually have three brains: the prefrontal lobe, the limbic system, the reptilian brain. And how, when you understand each, that will really help you design your classes a lot more effectively and connect with students better. That is kind of for teachers. And for students, they need to understand like a little bit about how they can rewire their brain, right? Neuroplasticity, like our brain is actually plastic. And because every single kid, we were being labeled growing up, right? You were so bad at math, you were so bad at this and that. So how can you undo that damage? How can you rewire that brain? How can you learn to really design a future? Affirmations, like positive affirmation, visualization, journaling, all those like deep kind of personal development body of work. It is so missing in the current curriculum, right? People probably, I can see why, because it's not academic enough. It's just like, ooh, all those things. I don't know if you know this Japanese scientist who was studying like water crystals, trying to understand how human emotions can affect water crystals. So pretty much when you are saying like, thank you, I love you, the water crystal is like symmetrical, looks really pretty. But when you are saying words like, I hate you, you don't deserve this, and the water crystal now becomes very ugly, not symmetrical, very dark. Oh, it's like rotten. So when you see that, you will really understand, oh my God, what I think on a daily basis is literally affecting the chemistry and the physiological part of my own body. And that can really empower you to think more positively, to really do the mindset work. As that, I don't know, I don't think it will ever be introduced in the traditional curriculum, but I think that is something so important and every kid needs to learn. And almost all of my students, by the time they finish a coaching session, like a program with me, my shortest program is 3 months. When I ask him, which part is your favorite section of the program? Every single of them told me mindset. They really understand, oh wow, mindset is everything. I can change my mind, I can master my mind, I can design my future, I can literally create my future, learn to connect to their future as opposed to become a prisoner of their past. And that is so powerful. Like when they understand that, you really transform them from the inside out. That is really, really missing. If I could redesign, and I would definitely add something like that into the traditional curriculum.
Yeah, I think that would be such a fantastic, add to it, especially the emotional intelligence part of it. And it sounds like, the spirituality There are teachings of religion and all that, but a lot of people think spirituality is connected to religion, but when in fact it's so much more than that, right? And I love how you mentioned about the crystals, because I had studied that as well, how everything in life is energy, and everything we do affects the energy around us. That's where aura comes from, pheromones, all that stuff. So yes, great additions. Thank you for that. I'd love to share 5 hobbies with you and the audience here that I think everybody should have. And maybe let me know what you resonate, or what doesn't, or what does resonate with you. Okay. One hobby would be making money, right? Everybody needs to know how to do that to live within society. Another one would be growth, learn how to learn, which is fantastic that you mentioned it, right? Another one would be physical fitness, right? Everybody goes to gym, they goes eat, they find all these diets to follow, and they just fall off because it doesn't work for them. When in reality, it's a mindset, and having the right education and practicing that habit of being physically fit mentally and physically, right?
Yeah.
And finally, part of it all, understanding how your thoughts create reality, and you have control over that. So it's fantastic. I hope everybody is able to find these habits and adopt it for themselves. And which brings me to my next topic of, it sounds like everything that we're creating in the classrooms, and especially with you, is astonishing leaders, right? Leaders to me is someone that doesn't just, tells you what to do. It's someone that's in the trenches with you, is constantly learning, growing, and helping you find your highest potential. Correct? So the next question would be, how do you cultivate these empathetic leaders, especially in your line of work with all the students that you work with, right? Because leadership nowadays is so important, but it's so undervalued and misunderstood often. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think we can definitely go back to the traditional, education schooling model. And students definitely like empathy. Like, in the US, you hear and you see all the like massive like shootings, all those things. And I think because throughout a person's educational journey, we value competition a lot more than collaboration. And research has shown that like children who actually attend the high achieving schools, and meaning like the private schools, the schools are really like rigorous in terms of curriculum, extracurricular activities. So students who actually attend those high achieving schools, they have more mental health issues. They have more mental health issues. They're more likely to have drug abuse, alcohol abuse, all sorts of abuses. And the level of their mental health issue is as bad as kids who grew up in poverty, in foster care, and who have a parent in prison. So when you think about it, right? So I think because in that extreme environment, and you don't see each other as friends, you see each other as a competitor. And if you are in that environment over a period of like a decade, right? Schooling can be like more than a decade, and you're always like compete, and you lose that empathy. And when I was a student, I attended a very good school, like very high achieving school, competitive. But I can tell you, by the time I graduated from high school, I hated everybody. I have no friends because we see each other as a competitor. And that's the message our teachers, our parents were telling us. Hey, if you don't study, guess what? Alex, he's like staying up late. He's doing this. You need to catch up. There's only one spot. There's only 5 Ivy League schools that everyone was trying to get into. If you don't work hard, those people are going to get in. So if you're just being brainwashed, right? And like in that environment, you see being a leader as a winner, right? Not those people who are actually stepping kind of on the backstage, facilitating and making your team members become the best. No, the school environment are cultivating like a different type of leader who are extremely aggressive, who are extremely self-centered. And because you see each other as competitor, you are the only winner in this entire game. And you see this as an either or situation. I think that is very counterintuitive to what you were talking about, empathetic leaders. So we really have to change, again, it goes back to education, the way that we're evaluating our students. And we also have to change the overall school environment from being overly competitive to a more collaborative environment, and intentionally to teach the next generation, how to love. First, learn how to love yourself. I think many people struggle with that. If you don't even know how to love yourself, you will definitely have a hard time learning how to love others, right? Starting with self-love, which is also missing. And then from that, learn how to love others. And, like I remember it was it at Stanford or Yale, one of those really famous schools, and their most popular class was a class about happiness. I learned how to be happy. So I think that is a great indicator showing that students are really struggling internally. They don't know how to be happy. They don't know how to love themselves. So we really have to, again, go back to the schooling environment, go back to education if our goal is to raise and cultivate more empathetic leaders.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. It actually reminds me of a saying, Thich Nhat Hanh. Do you know him, the Vietnamese Buddhist monk?
Oh no, tell me more.
So Thich Nhat Hanh actually says, the greatest gift you can give a child is the ability to find their own happiness.
Mm,
And I have two kids of my own, and I see, she loves the toys, she loves the food, she's so happy, but yet there's still so much learning to be done and to be had,
mm,
and she hasn't reached that point yet. And it's been studies have shown that until the age of 9, she's not able to
mm,
actually differentiate or develop that sense of happiness and what makes her happy. And during that time from birth till 9, if you're not doing it right, you're going to have years and decades of repairing and therapy and all that stuff to do if you're not doing it early. So it makes sense. Not many people know how to find their own happiness.
no,
And
yeah, absolutely.
and so it saddens me to hear this. And I hope one day this will be part of the curriculum, right? Which brings me to my final question here for you, my friend, is we touched on a lot of this already, but maybe you have something else that we haven't talked about yet, is what are some solution systems?
I wish I had the answer. I can tell you there's so many things that are wrong. And I don't know. I think because school, there are like everything's so institutionalized. There's so many interest parties involved. I think to have radical transformation within the system will definitely take a long, 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 long time. And I love the saying, the master's tools cannot dismantle the master's house. And that's why I left the system to build a new one. And I think instead of, I was trying to make changes, to introduce mindset, all those things, it didn't really work. So I think the best way to demolish this broken education system is actually to build a new one. And it is exciting that, I run my own thing. There are so many alternative schools, free school, online learning. And I also love like how many like industry leaders are actually launching their own curriculum. Like for example, Google, they have launched their own certifications to replace the 4-year college. I was like, that's great. And like more and more industry leaders are doing this. They are also playing an important role in raising the next generation. I think once we have more of those alternative forces, we can really from the outside to dismantle, to force the traditional educational model to really think, oh my God, if we don't disrupt, we will be disrupted, right? But I think to wait for the system itself, the education system itself, to one day feel like, oh my God, we need to change, I think that's going to take a long time. But there has to be external pressure to force them to change. So that's kind of why I do what I do. And I'm so excited to see all those alternative forces are trying, their apprenticeship schools, and there's so many different models. And all of those alternative forces are forcing the school to change. I think that is how we solve, reconstruct the broken education model. And in fact, last year there was a Forbes article came out saying that the importance of college dropped 50%, and in the last 6 years. And there's also another study showing that Americans actually value a Google internship more than a Harvard degree. So I think more external forces are waking up. So I think that's good news for people like us who are more
Mhm.
disruptive. So I think those forces are going to force the school to change, to adopt, to disrupt, to adapt and to the new trend. Otherwise, they will be disrupted. Actually, a Harvard University education futurist in 2018, he actually made a prediction that 50% of American colleges and universities will go bankrupt in the next 10 to 15 years. That was before COVID, right? So I think COVID has definitely accelerated that. So the schools who are just refuse, their head is in the sand, refuse, in denial, those schools will absolutely just be over, game over for them. So I think, being hopeful, I think it will change, but will definitely take some time, and we'll definitely need all those external forces to force the education model itself to change.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. And I'm so happy to hear about all these, alternative schools, you know, um, and I love how the fact that doing homeschooling as well. Homeschooling has
Mhm.
become, my kids are still very young,
Mhm.
but it has become a very viable option. And,
Mhm.
I will be touching base with you again about that, about
Mhm.
homeschooling and your experience. But I've also found that there's a missing component to that as well. It's the social aspect, and there's certain development aspects that aren't intertwined with the homeschooling. So I would add, just like you mentioned, professionals, practitioners coming in to teach them, making localized, community based meetups where they can learn together and just build something. And this whole sense of collaboration. If it's anything during this time of pandemic, we can't do this alone. The world
Yeah.
has to wake up. And you're right, how, there's so much competition going around. It's destroying us, and people aren't seeing
Mhm.
that, you know and so the collaboration is such a key piece, and I hope whoever's watching this, collaboration, help us spread the word, because that is the future. We need to do this together, otherwise we're just not going to make it, to be honest.
Absolutely.
So I want to say this opportunity. Thank you for watching, whoever was watching in here. If you want to connect with Dr. I, here's her links and her tags. Please do get a consultation from her. She does some phenomenal stuff. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe, like this video if it's helped, and share with somebody. And I thank you all, especially my special guest, I, for being here. And I want to say have a good evening, night, wherever you guys are in the world. And I will catch you guys in the next episode. Take care.